You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Well, good evening, and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC out of Indianapolis. Whether you're joining us on one of our radio syndicated partners, whether you're joining us on TV or cable, perhaps you're joining us via youtube.com/Daily Signal. The YouTube and Twitter X live streams are my personal favorite, or the podcast a bit later. We've got a heck of a show for you this evening, and it all boils down to Trump's State of the Union-y address that he gave to the joint session of Congress last night. It is a record-setting address to a joint session of Congress, formerly of Bill Clinton, who liked to rack up an hour or 20 minutes every now and again. And that was smashed by Trump last night, who went for an hour and 40 minutes. This is one of those. I was actually telling producer Daniel today on a call over this. If there is one Trump speech that you go and watch, if there is one that you go and watch, don't go watch his acceptance at the RNC. His inaugural address is pretty good. And of all of the ones that I have covered during the campaign and in the first administration, his speech to the union workers up at the transmission plant north of Detroit was one of my ones that I didn't dislike. I've never really been a fan of the way that Trump gives speeches. However, last night's State of the Union was incredible. Do yourself a favor. I will actually, after the show, we'll go in and we will put a link to the full live stream of the entire debate a union address in the description, because it's worth watching if you haven't done so. It basically broke down into two equally noteworthy yet totally different things. Number one was the unmitigated, not withheld joy of the Republican Party and Donald J. Trump. The palpable excitement and smiles on the right side of the aisle were just infectious. The cheering, the whooping, the hollering, the whistling, nothing too over the top most of the time. It was just a really decent time for the right. On the left, it was their funeral. And it was a funeral that they brought about themselves. So we're going to go through this as best I can, point by point. I'm going to try just to give you the details as to what happened, the big moments in this address, and the funeral response that the Democrats provided so graciously. And later on, we're going to talk to Representative Erin Houchin from Indiana's 9th Congressional, who was there, of course, that evening and has a few updates for us. And then we're going to bring on Kurt Schlichter, and we're just going to cackle at how horribly the left screwed this up. So let's dig right in. Donald Trump was all kinds of joyful, and he took every ounce of that joy and he shoved it down the throat of the left. There is a video, or a particular scene in SpongeBob SquarePants in which SpongeBob and Patrick think that Squidward is a ghost. Squidward has them fetching fruit, and SpongeBob and Patrick bring Squidward one watermelon fresh from the manure field and drops the watermelon in Squidward's mouth, and it's massive, and he barely gets the watermelon down. That's what Trump was doing to the libs last night. It was incredible. Roll the clip.
And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements. They won't.
So you saw, if you're watching, then you saw the paddles, the little auction paddles, hand going on 124 and that's sold to the sad lady in the pink. We'll talk about the protesting later, but Trump pointed out, and he did the entire evening, he always was waving over to the Democrats. Because to Trump, this was half comedy routine, half victory lap. And because of Trump's entertainment background, it landed really, really well. whether he was talking about something serious, such as ending the weaponization of the Department of Justice and smug lines galore.
And we have ended weaponized government where, as an example, a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent, like me. How did that work out?
Oh.
Not too good. Not too good.
And it's just made so much better by the response we'll get to in just a little bit. And Trump announced some brand new things that no one was expecting, like a multi-trillion-dollar Alaskan pipeline and mineral project here in the United States. No Ukraine required.
My administration is also working on a gigantic natural gas pipeline in Alaska, among the largest in the world, where Japan, South Korea, and other nations want to be our partner with investments of trillions of dollars each. There's never been anything like that one. It will be truly spectacular. It's all set to go. The permitting is gotten. And later this week, I will also take historic action to dramatically expand production of critical minerals and rare earths here in the USA.
There are so many clips from this particular address. We really aren't able to fit them all in. Along the same line of Trump victories that he claimed from the first month of his administration, Trump pointed out that the illegal immigration crisis, which we talked about during the Biden administration, Trump had been able to bring down that number in January, then into February, down to just over 8,000 illegal crossings per month. We'll talk about that with Representative Houchin in just a bit. And he mentions, you didn't really need legislation. It turns out you just needed a new president. And that wasn't the only executive style victory he touted. Trump announced in great shock to everyone that they had captured the individual that was responsible, or at least the most responsible, for the horrific bombing during Biden's disastrous pullout of Afghanistan, which killed 13 U.S. troops. Trump announced that they got him and he's being brought over to the U.S.
He is once again standing strong against the forces of radical Islamic terrorism. 3.5 years ago, ISIS terrorists killed 13 American service members and countless others in the Abbey Gate bombing during the disastrous and incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan. Not that they were withdrawing, it was the way they withdrew. Perhaps the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. Tonight, I am pleased to announce that we have just apprehended the top terrorist responsible for that atrocity, and he is right now on his way here to face the swift sword of American justice.
A lot of whooping and hollering from the right. Look at the left. A few muted half claps. The Democrats sat in stony silence. Again, we will get to that, I promise. One of the greatest moments, however, after Trump has been taking, of course, a lot of barbs and arrows for his more tough on the Ukrainian negotiation policy, was when he announced that Zelensky, for the very first time, was not just ready to sign the minerals deal, that Zelensky had put out in a letter he was ready to negotiate with Russia for the end of the Russo-Ukrainian war.
Today I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine.
So he talks about Zelensky valuing the relationship, Zelensky walking back a few of the things that he had said in the disastrous Oval Office meeting. And there's just so many other things that Trump hit right on the head in this particular address. He talked about the federal government supporting two genders, male and female. He called for a ban from Congress, called for legislation to ban child mutilation through transgender surgeries, foolishly called gender-affirming care by the liberal media. He celebrated the end of critical race theory and embraced meritocracy, the idea that your skills should define what you are. And he mentioned doctors and lawyers and air traffic controllers hired for skill and not for color or what they have in their pants. But the greatest thing, though, of all of the things that Trump talked about during the evening, and there were so many, were the different ways that the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, had exposed horrific amounts of spending in the federal government against the wishes of the American taxpayer. We're going to talk about that on the live stream radio, folks. We'll see you in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, now that the radio folks are safe off to commercial land, the comedy routine that Trump put together, listing the various things that Doge found, is without a doubt one of the best moments of presidential accountability to the American people we have seen in this entire country's history. It's phenomenal. I'm not even going to spoil it with any more of my introduction. Here you go.
Just listen to some of the appalling waste we have already identified. $22 billion from HHS to provide free housing and cars for illegal aliens. $45 million for diversity, equity, and inclusion scholarships in Burma. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is.
Democrats are so
$8 million
mad.
to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million. $8 million for making mice transgender.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick pause here because some on the left immediately lost their mind and said, well, actually, $8 million was to make mice transgenic, not transgender, which would make them easier to study in various diseases. Unfortunately, for the Poindexter glasses-wearing fact-checkers in the room, the federal government spent $10 million on providing same-sex style hormones to engender mice to try to have sex with the same sex, and then also to change the gender of the mice. So, yes, President Trump was wrong. The government did not spend $8 million on transgender mice. They spent $10 million on transgender mice. But, Mr. President, please.
This is real. $32 million for a left-wing propaganda operation in Moldova. $10 million for male circumcision in Mozambique. $20 million for the Arab Sesame Street in the Middle East. It's a program. $20 million for a program. $1.9 billion to recently created Decarbonization of Homes Committee, headed up, and we know she's involved. Just at the last moment, the money was passed over by a woman named Stacey Abrams.
He went on like this for quite a while and praised Doge and Elon Musk's team very heavily. Now, Alyssa Slotkin, the senator from Michigan, would make this the essence of her entire introductory response, and it was a horrible move because Doge is incredibly popular with Americans. The cutting of waste, abuse, and fraud in federal spending is something Americans have had a grudge against the federal government for ages, nigh eons. And this is something that Trump is bringing to attention. And you can talk about, we can talk about Trump and tariff policy and whether Trump is going to be moving towards a reciprocal tariff policy in which we charge what other countries are charging percentage-wise. We could have a discussion about whether or not Trump is going to be bringing through specific pieces of legislation through budget reconciliation processes, or he's going to focus more on midterms. There's a lot to dig into, and that's why I'm encouraging you to go watch the address yourself if you haven't. Because what we have to pivot to, we cannot miss the most beautiful meltdown on earth from the left. We're going to hit it here. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
The Democratic Party in its current state, as we know it, it's dead. It's done. Now, am I saying that the left is done? Absolutely not. But the party as it stands right now is dead. It is gone. It is in full retreat. It is collapsing in on itself. They were obliterated culturally in the 2024 elections. So when Trump and the Trump administration say they have some kind of a mandate from the American people to change things, the left immediately gets out the protractors and the rulers, and they go, well, actually, it's a very slim majority. And the cultural implications of the left's move dramatically into crazy town on things like men can become pregnant women and all other kinds of insanity has completely turned off the public to anything the left is selling. And instead of moving away from that, as that group in Loudoun County attempted to do, that we again talked to Adam Wren about, the DNC, under the leadership of Ken Martin and David Hogg, has decided to go even further to the left. And so you had a very weird amount of discord, disunity. No one knows what's going on the Democrat side of the aisle. The Congressional Democrats lost it before the speech even began. So some of them showed up in pink. A bunch of women and like a dude who thinks he's a girl showed up in pink, and it didn't really look as powerful as they were expecting. Just really sad and awkward. Not even everyone participated, and it would have fallen flat anyway because the Democrats in this particular situation had just voted against a bill that protected women's sports and protected women from being in locker rooms where there are perverted dudes with them. So not exactly, ringing true there. Then, of course, we talked about the paddles and them holding up a paddle that says, Elon Musk steals, which the average American watching, first of all, is going to have no idea what you're talking about. And those of us in politics know that that is not only a really stupid slogan, it doesn't even mean anything. You're accusing Musk of stealing billions from the federal government. I mean, that is what Elisa Slotkin does, contend, but we'll get to that. Then we had Jasmine Crockett, as I like to call her, the crackhead of Congress, who, when she's not outside the Speedway near my town at 5 a.m. yelling at people as they go in to get their coffee, she's making TikTok rap videos, I guess. What?
Oh no!
It's a cultural divide. I'm gonna get it on the floor.
You really about to do it?
48%
These are just
of
two
the music
staffers
is bigger than the music.
that are...
You really about to do it?
Yeah, they tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence.
Like
Hey, I'm tripping, I'm sliding, I'm riding through the back like...
Yeah. I'm wondering why Democrats feel so demoralized right now and why they think that their entire party has become a clown show that can't do anything at all coherently. Words escape me. But words certainly don't escape Ayanna Pressley, who walked out of the room to take a little selfie video.
All right, y'all, I don't have a lot of time. I just came off the House floor. I could not stand one more second, tolerate one more second. This man who parted January 6th insurrectionists, who desecrated.
I love it so much. I don't have a lot of time. They're chasing me like it's a ride at Universal Studios. And like the staff is way too into trying to get you into the theme of the ride you're on. Like, I'm just here for the roller coaster. And like, we don't have a lot of time. They're chasing us from the Pentagon. And they're like leaping over turnstiles. By the way, while she was making that video, Trump is leading cheers for a child with brain cancer. So thank goodness she got out in time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Maxine Waters, who will become important a little bit later for the first time in her life, who's somehow still alive, despite being a close relative of Noah stepping off of the ark. She's getting into election conspiracy theories now, which I was told was, treason.
Turned it over to him. And we don't know everything that Elon Musk has done with his high technology ass. Mm-hmm. We don't know what he's been accused of by some, as it may relate to.
We don't know what he's done with his high technology. What? They're so broken. They're so broken. And now we get to the piece de resistance. We get to Al Green, who looks like if you took like Jason Statham and bought him from Temu instead. He's got like the weird greasy ponytail and a cane that I'm not entirely sure he didn't steal from Boss Hogg and the Dukes of Hazzard. But anywho, Al Green stands up in the middle of Trump talking about small businesses and starts yelling about Medicare, which no one was talking about whatsoever. He start yelling. The Democrats behind him are just embarrassed.
Small business optimism saw its single largest 1-month gain ever recorded, a 41-point jump.
So the right's yelling at him. Speaker Johnson bangs the gavel.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions.
Now, here's a fun little fun fact. So many on the left lost their minds over this and said, oh, he's just protesting. It's free speech. No. When you are a member of a committee, when you are a member of a Robert's Rules of Order organization in which you are participating in the grandeur of some type of government system, whether it's a school board meeting, whether it's a state house meeting, whether you're in Congress and it's in session, you agree to abide by the rules. This is so people are given the floor to speak, and then you may respond. You ask for the floor. Mr. Speaker, I would like to respond. And it's a congressional situation. The president has the authority to address Congress. But anywho, he's in the middle of standing up looking aggressively constipated.
That's your warning.
So Green shouts he has no mandate. And there's the whole, he has no mandate, which means, again, something. The Democrats behind him look like they would like to crawl under the nearest cargo ship wreckage and die slow, painful deaths. Those poor people. So he doesn't sit down. And then finally, Speaker Johnson just has the sergeant at arms just boot him right out.
And continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the sergeant at arms to restore order to the joint session.
So, seeing that doesn't work, Speaker Johnson then goes for a more direct Louisiana Baptist approach, which is sit down, you petulant child.
Mr. Green, take your seat.
Sit down.
Take your seat, sir.
He doesn't. He's shaking his golden cane.
Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the sergeant at arms to restore order.
So there was a moment in the semifinals of the U.S.-Canada hockey game. In the first 9 seconds, there were 3 fights, and it was amazing. This was that moment. This was near the beginning, and it was a complete humiliation. So this is the guy who was going to impeach Trump for dastardly deeds. And it's just getting worse for him. I love it so much. Of course, you had Elizabeth Warren, who was clapping for Ukraine, and that brings us to one particular issue. There were many cases throughout the evening in which President Donald Trump gave a certain amount of praise to various individuals who had gone through particular hardships. And this is in all kinds of State of the Union addresses. It goes all the way back to Reagan. Trump would praise or give his condolences to, for example, Laken Riley's family, to another family whose child was murdered by an illegal immigrant. He ended up naming a park in the area after the child. Gave praise to, a boy with brain cancer, made him an honorary member of the Secret Service. The less response to this was a little questionable, one might say. And we'll catch the live stream folks up on that in a second. Radio Crew will be back in a minute. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. So all of these various proclivities, Republicans have consistently clapped for in other administrations. When Biden would say, this person was, really down on their luck, but we helped them, Republicans would dutifully clap. And that's something that has been a State of the Union staple for a very long time, right? The left did not do so because remember back at the beginning when President Trump said they will not clap or applaud no matter what I do. They took that to heart. And so when there was a child who was being honored for his brave journey, loving the police, something that Trump finds very endearing, he's being held up by his dad, He's made a Secret Service agent. He hugs the director of the Secret Service. A very touching moment. Just a universal American moment kind of a thing. They're chanting his name, DJ. And if you look behind the Republicans right there, and then they'll zoom out here.
Thank you, DJ.
If you didn't catch it, the Democrats are sitting down, all but like one of them. Sitting down, not clapping, stone-faced. They didn't clap for the child with cancer, nor the return of an American teacher who was held in a Moscow prison. I thought the Democrats supposedly hated Russia, so much for that. They didn't clap for the capture of the Abbey Gate bomber. They didn't clap for foster parents. They didn't clap for all of these things that are super easy just to be a part of the American culture in. But there was one thing that they did clap for, and that was giving foreign aid to Ukraine. I kid you not, that's the whole thing. They clapped for one thing in Trump's entire speech, giving money to Ukraine during the Biden administration. Here you go.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense. With no security, with no anything.
The Democrats are clapping.
Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
Calls out Senator Warren. She's just sitting there clapping stupidly. Attaboy, Liz. All right, and of course, when that's the only thing you clap for, you look really, really gross. We'll get to Slotkin's response in a minute. First, we're going to head over to Representative Erin Houchin. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. And out of that Indianapolis station, I'm thrilled to welcome on to the show Representative Erin Houchin from Indiana's 9th. It's good to have you, Representative. Quite a night last night.
Thanks for having me. It was an exciting night, a great speech by President Trump, good feedback from constituents back home that watched the speech. It was a breath of fresh air.
I was going to save this for a conversation maybe with Kurt Schlichter over at Town Hall, but, just to heck with it. Did you see the CBS YouGov poll in which they said that only like 48% of the people watching identified as Republicans, but the approval rate of the speech in their instant poll was above 70%, like 72%? That's nuts.
I did see that. I also saw a new poll today that said that 49% of Democrats, only 49% of Democrats approve of congressional Democrats in Washington. It's a bad sign for them. I mean, what their performance last night, and it was a performance, it was disgraceful.
That's the opportune word.
It was disgraceful. It was shameful. It was sad. It's totally out of touch with the American people. It's insulting to everyday Americans and, not only the people in the chamber, but around the country.
A small moment aside here, just to give your team a bit of a heart attack that I'm going off the track. But I found it not just abhorrent, again, that they didn't clap for the young man who had struggled with brain cancer that was made an honorary member of the Secret Service, or the teacher returned home after being imprisoned in Moscow, or any of the other, the foster parents, the Laken Riley's mother, her family there, the family of the little girl killed who President Trump named a park for. Those things weren't clapped for. And I've heard the argument, well, but they didn't clap for anybody. But that's not true. Because when President Trump started talking, foreign aid, as soon as he mentioned giving foreign aid to other countries, including Ukraine, that got applause from the Democrats. If you're going to do a no applause thing the whole night, at least hold true to that. That is the worst optical thing I think you could do.
Well, and not standing or applauding for the Gold Star families.
Right.
I mean, we could continue to go down the list. Not standing or applauding for the student accepted to West Point. Not standing or applauding or giving any kind of sympathy or condolences for the family of Corey Comparator.
Right.
It was really unbelievable to watch. I mean, if you go back and look at the State of the Union last year under President Biden, Republicans did stand. We walked into the chamber with the president as his escort committee, people on both sides of the aisle. We stood when we agreed with him. We honored his guests. And none of that happened from House Democrats last night. The escort committee, which I was a member of because of the leadership position, was only the Republicans, which is highly unusual.
Yes,
it's a matter of disrespect. Last night, President Trump showed us the exact reason why the overwhelming majority of the American people voted for him. And the Democrats showed us exactly why they are in the minority. They're completely out of touch. Everything that they did was out of step with where I think most of the American people are and would feel about proper decorum in the chamber and just basic respect.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned prior decorum of Republicans, because earlier on the show this evening, we played concurrent clips, because I'm such a, well, let's go look at the receipts kind of guy, of Republicans applauding commonality, let's come together points, even if they believed that perhaps the president was saying them disingenuously. They did honor his guests. They did honor the country. They did, of course, stand in those particular points. But let's dig into some of the meat. We could talk about this, I'm sure, for the entire segment. But the Laken Riley Act being passed is already having considerable impact. And this is important because people think the Laken Riley Act, at least in the public discourse that I've heard, is more of a generalized illegal immigrant policy that's kind of just toughening things up across the board. But it has specific impact on making sure that violent illegal immigrants around the country aren't left to loiter. Can you tell us about what's going on in the 9th?
Yes. So the Laken Riley Act we passed. It was we passed it out of the House. The Senate passed it. It was the first bill President Trump signed. We passed this bill under the last Congress, but Senate Democrats led by Chuck Schumer killed the bill. And President Biden wasn't calling on us to take action either on the Laken Riley Act. The Laken Riley Act allows a prioritization of the worst violent criminals to be deported. But interestingly, we had a case in my district in Southeast Indiana where an illegal immigrant drove without a driver's license and hit and killed Brad Kastner. And the interesting thing about that, in Indiana, that's a C misdemeanor.
Yes.
And it's not a deportable offense. He had lied about his identity, so he had evaded law enforcement in a number of ways. But finally, when the Laken Riley Act got passed, we were able to give some justice, some form of justice to the family of Brad Kastner because this illegal immigrant is on his way to be deported back to Guatemala. Is he here in the United States, in prison under our criminal justice system? No, but American taxpayers aren't paying for his, 3 squares a day and his housing. They are, he's being sent back to Guatemala where he's Guatemala's problem. And now, he will be kept from getting back into the United States as long as we have a Republican president who is going to make sure the border is secure. One thing of note, border crossings are down to record lows in the month of February, down to below 9,000 encounters from hundreds of thousands of encounters. So it's amazing what strength in the White House will do for our domestic and our foreign policy. We're seeing it all over. It was great to see President Trump highlight all of those successes last night, and sad that the Democrats couldn't even stand for some of our common goals.
I feel cautiously optimistic because I see things being done, like actual things being done. And it's a little jarring to see direct impact from policy which is passed by Congress. I've been extremely critical of what I feel has been Congress' abdication of their duty to the regulatory and rules practices of the administrative agencies over the last greater half of a century. And to see the Laken Riley Act passed into law and already making communities around the country safer is an incredible thing. And obviously, I thank you for your work on that. But you've got another bill in the works. And this is about starting to make things right regarding the COVID-19 vaccination system and vaccination requirements in general regarding transplants. Can you tell us at all about that?
Yeah, we are still undoing some of the damage done by the Biden administration with respect to COVID-19 mandates. And one of those that remains is, and it's not for every hospital, but some hospitals will not allow anyone to be on a transplant list if they have not had the COVID-19 vaccine. And I have a constituent in my district who falls into that category. Cincinnati Children's Hospital denied her being on the transplant list because of the COVID-19 vaccination status. And that's just denying somebody life-saving care because they don't have a vaccine that never worked anyway, is not something that we should be making prohibitive for them to access this care. So Congressman Mike Ruley of Ohio, he represents Ohio, which is where Cincinnati Children's Hospital is. Mm-hmm. And me, I represent the constituent that is the victim of this policy. We have a bill that says you can't discriminate someone based on their vaccination, COVID-19 vaccination status for access to the transplant list. We've also led a letter to President Trump asking him to do the same by executive order until we can get this bill passed into law. But I want to touch on the regulatory structure because I've been preaching that for many years, that we tend to cede our responsibility to the federal bureaucrats who are not elected by the people. And we talk about term limits a lot. But if you term limit members of Congress without term limiting the bureaucrats, then they're going to continue to have more and more and more power. So
that's
Chip Roy and I have
a point. I've never heard it phrased that way before, but I'm not as in favor of limiting the people's right to elect whom they will. Actually, last night on the show, I suggested that, well, what we do is we just cut the salary of the member in Congress in half each consecutive term that they serve. That
would make it less attractive for sure.
Yeah, but you make an excellent point about the bureaucrats, though. I mean, some of these people have been in federal government bureaucratic agency positions for 3 or 4 decades, and there's no accountability for their work at all.
It was primarily why Donald Trump could not drain the swamp in his first administration. There were at least 10,000 holdovers from the Obama administration that were carried over, that were undermining his work. Fortunately, because of Doge and because of President Trump's understanding now of what hindered his processes, we're getting our hands around it and trying to get the authority back of the elected representation of the people away from unelected and nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, the Chevron deference case from the United States Supreme Court did tell Congress, basically, we want you to be more specific in your lawmaking to give less authority to the bureaucracy and in its rulemaking. And I'm really intent on restoring government of the people, by the people, for the people through their elected representatives in Congress.
So I was looking up a few things while you were giving that explanation that supported what it is that I'm about to suggest. I think that's also going to have to boil down in a specificity of the allocation of funding, for example, to certain aid projects. So the Supreme Court ruled that for services already rendered in the USAID situation, that the U.S. does have to pay out from that $2 billion allotment. A lot of this would be solved. We wouldn't even have to worry about all of the secret, hidden, goofy, insulting to American taxpayers projects if the congressional allotment of spending was clearly identified and highlighted in the budget resolutions, reconciliations, whatever the financial maneuver it is that Congress is working on in that situation.
Yes, it's what we do in our state houses, right? We have line items in our budget,
exactly.
So you know where all the money is going and how it's being spent, and the federal government should be no different. But we do have a process through our appropriations where, and call them earmarks or community project funds. But without the community project funds, then the decisions are made by the bureaucrats instead of by elected representatives. So this is money that will be appropriated, that we can either decide as elected representatives how we'd like to see it distributed for the benefits of our districts, for projects that are necessary, or we could just cede all of that responsibility to the bureaucrats to decide. I really don't want the Department of Transportation under a Democrat president deciding where federal highway funds should be spent. I want those dollars to be spent where they're needed to, make 3 lanes on I-65 or make other road improvements in our state.
Three well-paved lanes
that's
on
correct.
I-65.
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah, that's right.
Hey, well, I'm more of the I-70 corridor kind of a guy, but when it comes to properly spent federal funds, it's amazing how you can start reframing how Americans think about appropriate government spending if they see the effects in front of them. And again, call me cautiously optimistic, call me naive, whatever it is that you'd like. But if this administration can move behind Congress in a supporting role to get good financial items on the table and specificity, and in the same way they did with the Laken Riley Act, I'm really excited to see where things are going to go.
And you're absolutely right about the transparency of this. That's the beauty of the community project funding. We have to put our names on it. So this is not the bridge to nowhere that we have had in the past. There's a lot of transparency. We have to attach our names to it. It has to be tied to a specific project. Right. I set parameters for those requests that are infrastructure based or they have a community health interest. So we put in a request to help Brown County get a sewer system that they're in desperate need of. We put in a request to protect the Clarksville shoreline, which since for about 50 years since the Army Corps of Engineers put in the lock and dam system, we're losing we've lost about 100 cubic yards of the state of Indiana to the Ohio River, including the George Rogers Clark homestead.
Unconstitutional. I will not stand for the territory of Indiana being reduced by 1 inch.
Every year we lose more of it to the river. And so we're finally trying to get a project in place that will protect the shoreline from further erosion. So these are some of the things that we're trying to get done on behalf of our communities. And there's full transparency behind it. And that's why that is a much better system than just appropriating funds to, some federal agency, and then they get to decide their priorities.
These vague, maybe a couple of adjectives thrown in there, for the good of all people.
Yes, right. Yes.
Not what's needed. Representative Erin Houchin from Indiana's 9th. Thanks for taking a couple of minutes today to cover a whole lot of things. And even though we went longer than I expected, I think the FCC might make an exception on commercial time for this one.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Feels like I'm losing.
And now we get to the good meltdown. So how do you know it's a funeral? Well, it's a funeral because the legacy media came out after this particular State of the Union address style speech for Trump. And the story was not, well, here are 18 things Trump said that was wrong and we didn't like it. And actually, it's spelled I before E, except after $8 million from USAID. Well, that didn't happen. Instead, what you saw were people like Jake Tapper over at CNN pointing out what everyone in the country is very well aware of. The left has got absolutely nothing.
You can really sense Republicans with a pep in their step and Democrats rather demoralized. I mean, understandably so, given the fact that Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House, not to mention a conservative lean on the U.S. Supreme Court.
So there's that special moment. Then you get to what happened. Why are the Democrats humiliated? Because on social media, every person I knew, and many of them on the left and in the kind of independent space, noted how horrible it looked for the Democrats not to clap once for anything. Children with cancer, foster parents, people brought home from Russian prisons, actually getting the Russia-Ukraine negotiations moving, talking about huge new projects for this country like the Alaskan pipeline, the amazing progress towards honoring Laken Riley's family through the Laken Riley Act, Didn't even clap for Laken Riley's mother. That looks horrible when the only thing you clap to in contrast is the Ukraine spending. That doesn't look too good. So what did they try to do? Well, Nicole Wallace on MSNBC thought, you know what? I'll run my mouth about that kid with cancer, and somehow turned the moment about the kid with cancer into a January 6th moment of sorts.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer.
Please stop talking. That's good. That's fine. That's what one should say. Don't keep talking. Look, she's looking down. She's like, I gotta let the progressive beast flow. And boy, does she.
But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope.
Can't just talk about the kid getting to fulfill a dream of his. Instead, it's, man, I sure hope he doesn't kill himself defending the Capitol from Donald Trump. It's a funeral. Rachel Maddow also made a wildly untrue claim that apparently Doge has just started sacrificing children with cancer at the Aztec monuments.
For the record, and this is disgusting, the president made a spectacle out of praising a young man who thus far survived pediatric cancer, as if the president had something to do with that. This was in the midst of him praising Doge. The Doge cuts, among other things, have cut off funding for ongoing research into pediatric cancer.
All right, survey. Does the Department of Government Efficiency in any way, shape, or form cut off funding for government-related pediatric cancer research? Missed it by that much. It really is a shame to watch no, it's not a shame at all. It's hilarious watching the left set themselves on fire like Aaron Bushnell and then refuse to go any other direction. Since this moment, by the way, the left has just gone even further into crazy chaos over the Trump administration. And it all boils down to one thing. They have decided to focus their entire counter-Trump campaign on tariffs? No. That's a soft target one might be able to hit effectively. On grocery prices? Well, they're focusing way more on eggs than grocery prices themselves. If they focused on inflation as a whole, maybe. But instead, they only ever mention eggs. Again, as though Donald Trump can snap his fingers and make, hundreds of millions of chickens appear. The worst thing they could do is, amid record popularity for a second Republican administration and the exposure of really bad spending policies, to then go after Elon Musk. And that's not only what, again, you hear Maxine Waters yelling and screaming and whatnot. That is what the Democrat response from Senator Elissa Slotkin, broadcasting out of Michigan, that's what she made her entire introduction about. And it was really something to behold. So she gets up in front of the camera and she says, "Hi, I'm from Michigan. And Donald Trump won where I am, but I'm a Democrat, so therefore I know everyone has a lot in common." Which immediately lost the majority of the country, because she is one of the Democrats who did not vote for the bill that would have kept men out of women's sports, which is an 80-20 issue in this country, across all demographics except for wine-drunk liberal women. And so Elissa Slotkin, who has absolutely no ability whatsoever, considering she's an extremely acrid senator, by the way. She's like one of the worst ones in the confirmation hearings at going after people because she was in the CIA, and so therefore she served the most servicey kind of service ever. She then decides to make her entire case about Donald Trump, about Elon Musk, and the claim that she makes. And don't worry, I will play the audio lest one think I'm making this up. Her claim is that Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, that they are going through all of these federal spending projects and they are revealing projects that are, again, abusive, fraudulent, or wasteful, so that they can then take that money for themselves, for the billionaires. Like Elon Musk is running into buildings with a bucket, and then he's coming out and the bucket's filled with cash, and he's like handing it to a billionaire waiting in line behind a velvet rope. No.
President Trump is trying to deliver an unprecedented giveaway to his billionaire friends. He's on the hunt to find trillions of dollars to pass along to the wealthiest in America. And to do that, he's going to make you pay in every part of your life.
No. That's not a thing. On the hunt for trillions of dollars so he can... What are you talking... I mean, seriously, I know you don't like Trump. I get it. I hear you. That's just a little bit much there. You don't have to go completely into loony bin, but aside from that, we'll have to say goodbye to the radio folks. We're going to stick around for a little bit of bonus tonus. Thank you folks very much for tuning in on the radio network. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right. Time for a smidgen of bonus tonus, because believe it or not, there is other news that has happened since, and it is really, 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 really bad for the left. When I say that the left has gone through a full 5-stage funeral with a full procession, I mean it. I really don't see at this point how it can get any worse for them, but there's a little bit of news that we need to put into context before we dig into our conversation with Kurt Schlichter, who should be hopping on in just a couple of seconds. The polls that came out of this State of the Union are like nothing I have ever seen before. And it's not just the CBS YouGov poll, like maybe it was an outlier, maybe it was, just kind of a one-off. CNN had a snap poll, and it was the same kind of result. Not above 50% of people watching Republicans, about 20 to 30% Democrats, about 20 to 30% on the Republican, on the independent side of the political spectrum. And the vast majority were in extreme favor of President Trump's speech. I mean, according to the CBS News poll, among speech watchers, 74% found the speech presidential, 74% found the speech entertaining, 71% found the speech inspiring, 62% found the speech unifying, which is wild. It is wild that would be the take of a country that, according to the media, Trump's very unpopular. People don't like him at all. Ooh. Only 46%, I bet you can figure out which 46%, found it rather divisive. 77% of people who watched the speech liked Trump's pointing out of waste in government spending. They liked Trump talking about his successes on immigration and the border. 73% liked how Trump is handling Ukraine and Russia. 73% of those who watched the speech, only 48% of those watching called themselves Republicans. That is a very, very different story than many are being told right now by the media. There's this idea running around with the hair on fire. Oh, we're becoming Russia. We're going to be on the wrong side of World War III. Oh, no. And Americans just don't see that. It is because of the Trump cycle. We've seen this before. It's the exact same strategy every ding-dong-dang time. And here we are yet again, and Americans are catching on to that. Now, are there some economic situations up ahead that Trump is going to have to keep an eye on? Yes. Only 65% liked Trump's discussion on tariffs. I think this is kind of a dual issue. Number one, Trump has described liking tariffs at this point as a long-term economic policy. Now, could that be a negotiation tactic to frighten the rest of the world into doing anything at all possible not to be hit by long-term tariffs from the United States? Yes, it could. Is that what's happening? I have no idea. I sure hope so, but I have no idea. As I've said before, a tariff is just another kind of tax. And as long as in the United States there is an income tax and a sales tax and a property tax and all of the other kinds of taxes you and I are slapped with on the daily, a tariff is just another tax to add to the pile. unless it's being used as a diplomatic lever to lower other countries' tariffs. Now, in his address, Trump only really talked about reciprocal tariffs. He talked a little bit about national defense style tariffs in regard to steel and aluminum, which that's another topic for another time. We've actually got a great guest to chat with about that on the show. That's not for today. As far as reciprocal tariffs are concerned, though, Canada, China, India, other countries around the world have put restrictive tariffs on U.S. goods for ages, which, yes, you guessed it, does in fact hurt the U.S. economy. So, if Trump just does the reciprocal tariff idea, which seems to be how Commerce Secretary Lutnick and Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent are moving, I would expect that. There's this idea that has been pushed around in the media and by a lot of the neckbeard chin scratchers who are suggesting that Donald Trump is just going to put tariffs in place and then Trump is going to make that the definitive policy for the United States all the way through midterms and the end of his term. You must not know anything at all about Donald Trump. At all. If you think that Donald Trump is anything other than a pragmatist, meaning Trump does what works. When something works, Trump leans into it really hard. That's the entire reason he likes Elon Musk. Elon Musk does something, and then it works. And he does it in a boisterous, aggressive fashion that usually breaks a few things along the way, and then after he's succeeded, he goes back and cleans up the mess. That's how Trump likes to do things. If you think that Trump is going to put in tariffs, and it's the stock market's going to do a serious dive over a period of time, and it's going to really stagnate the economy, you think Trump's just going to sit there and go, any second now it'll work? No. Ain't going to be a thing. That's the worst case scenario. It is. The best case scenario is one that I have seen play out multiple times in both administrations. And so all I got to say is the classic Midwestern retort to any individual in any kind of a sporting conversation, period. Scoreboard. Scoreboard. If it works, and I'm going to trust in those fundamentals. Now, again, if that turns out not to be true, well, then, of course, criticism is 100% due and necessary. So, those things all put together, it's time to go back to making fun of the lunatics and a half with one of the best guys to make fun of them with. That would be Kurt Schlichter over from townhall.com. He's waiting. He's on the line. We're going to go catch him. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here at the Daily Signal. Be right back.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Joined by Kurt Schlichter from townhall.com. Good to have you as always. All of those niceties.
Yeah, it's great to be here after the probably the most amazing State of the Union I've ever seen.
It really was the most amazing State of the Union. I was not going into it expecting this to be one of the best addresses I think I've ever seen. But of course, though Trump was going on a victory tour, arguably a pretty well-deserved victory tour so far in this administration, the resulting fallout from the petulant whining, the tears, the rap video, I mean, just...
that was nice. That was
my gosh. I was wondering what Jasmine Crockett was going to do. And she managed to be embarrassing before and then during the State of the Union address.
She should really go back to MIT and continue her pioneering particle physics research that made her famous. Her genius is wasted in Congress. I mean, exactly what's the demographic that discount Queen Latifah's applying for? I mean, really, get a couple of staffers in there and just do this like awkward rap thing, and it's like I'm surprised there wasn't some dude there like throwing dollar bills,
And it's like a who's gonna fight? I'm gonna fight.
Like, is there David Duke's going, hey, I got some more stereotypes for you. Oh, thanks. I'll incorporate those into the whole mess. I'm like, what were you thinking? What was the thought process? That was my whole thought process the whole night.
Now, hang on, though.
Yeah.
I've been asking for ages, since the election, when are the Democrats going to come up with some type of a unified response to the Trump campaign and the Trump administration, to the humiliating defeat that they suffered? And I know their response so far has been, well, it wasn't a real humiliating defeat. It was a lot closer. Culturally, it was devastating. All of the stuff they stand for, wholly rejected. And there was a small meeting of Democrats in Loudoun County, Virginia, that we talked about on the show that tried to moderate. The DNC smacked that down like somebody blocking an Angel Reese shot. I mean, I'm not sure where they're going with Al Green standing up and shaking his cane about something Trump wasn't even talking about.
The whole thing's onanism, okay? It gives them, it's empty, humiliating, but gives them a transitory bit of pleasure. It's just, I mean, it's gross. I mean, really, who besides them and them alone, the MSNBC contaminated moron clique, are like, oh, great, the guy with the cane shouting at clouds. Yeah, fight the power.
Like, even CNN and MSNBC did admit that the Democrat response was really embarrassing. CNN actually suggested that this isn't what their voters were voting for. Their constituents didn't feel like they had a really good resistance to the Trump administration from the Pepto-Bismol crew and then the auctioneers holding up their little signs that said, Elon steals. How is that supposed to stick in the mind of the voter come midterms?
Take that. All I could think of is, oh, he wants more tri-tip. I mean, it was just, they are completely lost. Trump and the Trump administration is totally inside their decision cycle. They are flipping and flopping from outrage to outrage. The mainstream media is not designed to deal with this kind of onslaught. Well, they focus on one thing for a few minutes before their attention, like a dog with a squirrel, gets dragged off to something else. They don't come up with a coherent thing. Okay, what's the coherent thing on Elon Musk? The richest man in the world is going to sneak into Social Security and take your check.
Well, you heard, that's what Elise Laken actually suggested. Like from her, the official Democrat response, I thought, okay, she's going to come out, she's going to hit Trump on tariffs, because there is at least a semi-soft target you could theoretically throw a punch there if you're the Democrats, right? That's the one place. She comes out and says they are out there hunting for federal spending so that Trump can give a tax, or no, she didn't say tax break. She said that so that Trump can give like a payoff to billionaires. And I thought, are you seriously suggesting that the whole Doge thing is so billionaires can pocket money? That's your move? That's the strategy?
You're right. The banning the subsidies of Ecuadorian transgender mine troops is really cover for giving a rounding error to a rounding error of a rounding error to a rounding error for Elon Musk. You've caught us. Good call. Excellent plan. No wonder you guys are winning. I mean, it's insane.
I am shocked by the insanity of making Elon Musk their entire personality, to the point that there were really only two, other than again, Green, standing up and shouting about how many onions he was able to buy with a nickel as a kid.
Well, it's five B's to a quarter.
5 B's to a quarter, and an onion on the belt was much more appropriate. Then he got out. He's like, I'm going to file more impeachment proceedings against Trump.
I mean, he looks like a lunatic. He looks like a lunatic. And, there were a couple Democrats just sitting there like this, just like, oh, my gosh. And eventually some of them broke with it. It's like, OK, I'm going to cheer the firemen. I'm going to break ranks and cheer for the.
Yep. You saw 2 or 3 people very, very lackadaisically clapping for the capture of the terrorists, or was it the American being returned home from Moscow prisons?
Yes.
Like just a few were like, guys, I have to be elected a little bit.
See, they don't want to normalize Trump, except Trump has been normalized and no one asked them.
Several times over at this
point. The election, they lost. If there's somebody abnormal out there, I suggest it's the one who looks like the blue-haired, creepy one who looks like she's about to chomp down on Hansel and Gretel.
Oh my goodness, LaRose she's insane. I mean, that is a nutcase. And then they have
when people dress like lunatics, it's because they're lunatics. And my favorite part is when they get all huffy about how you point out you're dressing like a freak. No, I'm expressing myself. Yes, you're expressing you're a freak. Why are you shocked that I notice?
I think that part of that is the insanity of also how they dressed for the State of the Union address, because it wasn't enough just to wear pink and look stately. You had that one congresswoman who drew all over a pink blazer with Sharpie.
14th Amendment. Well,
like
okay.
Anyone had asked. And
is somebody against the 14th Amendment? I guess there's somebody who disagrees with the interpretation of birthright citizenship. You know, when you disagree with things, you take them to court or you debate it. Is that a problem for you? I think for them it is. Look, they can't conceive. They're like the Europeans. They can't conceive of anything outside their narrow bounds. Now, in Europe, they handle it by just simply making the parties illegal or arresting you. Or in the case of Hungary, right? They have an assembly where each state gets its vote, and Hungary hasn't been voting like everybody else. So the answer is, well, let's stop Hungary from voting. That's democracy. Right? Anything right in here is democracy. And they want to do that here. And they've tried to. They tried to write more than half of America outside the bounds of enfranchisement. And America's like, nah, we're just not going to do that. And they're freaking out. The norm, for instance, was the leadership of both parties goes and walks the president in. Right? Nice little symbol of American unity, and they refuse to do it. And it's like, guys, you're knocking down all the norms, and then you get all upset when Trump's like, norms.
Well,
whatever.
They think that by knocking down the norms that they had been shifting the culture around them. But now when the Democrats start running around knocking over the norms, a little too close to my example of a toddler throwing a fit in a Walmart and knocking over boxes. Now the culture in the vast majority of the country, given the approval ratings for the speech last night, are just watching them and just embarrassed by the actions and activities. I mean, not clapping for the kid with cancer. And I mean, like, yikes.
Take that, you kid with cancer. You've associated yourself with Trump. You are now officially a bad person, and you probably are Hitler and love Putin.
And they doubled down. Nicole Wallace is like, man, I sure hope that if he becomes a cop that he isn't protecting the Capitol, and I sure hope he doesn't commit suicide. And I was like, oh my God.
Are you insane?
Why?
Look, these SSRI-ridden Chardonnay-swilling wine women.
Yes.
These mediocre white chicks like Slotkin. They're just like the worst. They're terrible. They always look like they're on the verge of complaining to the manager. They're frustrated because men and attractive women are happy. I think there needs to be an exception to the 19th Amendment for wine women.
There can be no Chardonnay in your bloodstream for you to vote.
Femboys like Tim Walz shouldn't vote either.
Right, yeah, the American Doug Ford. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God. Oh, and I love Doug Ford. Oh, have you noticed the Canadians who've just spent the last few years crying about how their whole country is built on the bodies of Indigenous First Peoples? And now they're like waving the maple leaf flag.
Yeah.
Guys on
Nationalism came for them in the night. I did want to point out that I enjoyed watching them rip the whiskey from America that they had already bought from the country.
Take that
off of themselves to shove in the back room, like, yes, you sure got us. You drunks.
It's like, guys, it's just sad and pathetic. Apparently, the Canadians are now going to rally around Pierre Trudeau, or whatever his name is.
Pierre Poilievre, yeah. Oh, Justin Trudeau,
Little Fidel, and and it's like these minor foreign countries. I mean, I've just had it with them. The Europeans being all uppity about America. Keith Starr, the left, like the British leftists Now they're all like, we must celebrate our honored dead. Dude, 2 weeks ago, you took down Horatio Nelson's portrait and put up some feminist lesbian.
Yep. And that's why when I look at the left's response last night, and they're yelling right now about Canada, or they're just yelling. I mean, really, just before we hopped on, I shot over to check briefly if there was perhaps another take out there in the wild ether. And I looked over on MSNBC, which was a poor choice, and there is just actual yodel yelling that is going on without any substance whatsoever. And that's just how destitute the left is. They had to pull Elise Slotkin out there to make up imaginary tales about Elon Musk, and that was the whole thing.
Well, look, Trump has this amazing ability to make his opponents become so deranged they take the worst possible political positions simply to show him and own him. So now I'm going to go on the 20 side of the 80-20 no dudes in women's sports thing. I'm going to side with the little Slavic amphibian guy, when he comes to the White House and disrespects our president and our vice president. I'm going to be against finding waste in the government. I'm going to be for government flunkies having perpetual sinecures. I mean, it's like, there's got to be some Democrat, I don't know if there are any left, actually, but there used to be like hard-edged Democrat operatives, right? The Carville types who kind of understood that, normal people are going to look at you and think you're insane.
Well, they did. They went to that place in Loudoun County, Virginia, and they tried to have a small meeting. And then Ken Martin and his young lesbian lover, David Hogg, stepped out and said, we don't support this. The party's not going to moderate. We got to go further.
You got to go further. Don't associate yourself with the American flag. Don't associate.
Why would you go to a church?
Yeah.
Wow.
You have to hate Americans harder. And they do hate Americans. They hate normal Americans. They think they're racist. You just want to go, do you think America's a racist country? Well, yeah, but I love it. Oh, shut up.
It really does just take a moment of befuddlement, just complete abject shock to look at what was on display last night and see that there really is no plan how they're going to waltz into midterms with any kind of momentum. Now I don't think they're going to be able to.
Historically, they should go and take the House back. That's how it works. And yet these guys are like, well, I've got a plan. Let's come down with transsexuals. Let's get on their side.
And then let's sing about being on someone's side and, weird off-tone, horrible, cold weather choir singing.
I mean, who's it? What, Rosa DeLauro, the Gretel Muncher? I mean,
oh yeah, that's right. The keeper of keys at Gringotts. Yes.
She's like, yeah, my pretty.
That's my great. Yeah. Speaker Johnson holds up to the gavel. She's like, my precious.
I mean, great. You've got Smeagol on your side. Terrific. I'm glad they're screwing up. I'm glad they're completely inept. But I wrote an article in Town Hall.
Hold on, wait. I'm sorry. I got to point out there's a video that was just released that Rosa DeLauro is talking about Trump's speech being vengeful. You've seen Seinfeld, right?
Yeah.
She's wearing Kramer's pimp coat. Honest to God, the actual pimp coat that Kramer is wearing in Seinfeld. So she's got the purple hair, and then she's leaving. Jerry, I'm going to run for Congress. I'm sorry, your article at Town Hall, please.
It was, where do you go after literally Hitler? And, they're actually puzzled. They're like, he's Hitler, ta-da! And everyone's like, nah, I don't think so. Well, we're going to push it a little further. He's Hitler and loves Putin. Yes, he's conspiring with Putin to turn America into something or other, or what are the voices telling you, Chris Murphy?
My goodness. I mean, he's trying so hard. They're all trying so hard. And at this point, at least, the entertainment value is worth every single penny. Kurt Schlichter, townhall.com. Dude, thanks as always for coming on and enjoying the absurdity. No one cackles over this garbage quite like we do.
Yeah, well, just all I can say is if you're wandering down a path through the woods and you see Rose DeLauro coming, just turn around. She'll throw you in the oven.
All right, that's a solid advice for Hansel and Gretel. This is the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal.
And with that said, we're going to wrap things up for this evening. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back with top news at 10 over on the Daily Signal at 5 in the morning because sleep is for quitters. And then, of course, the show tomorrow evening. Again, thanks a ton and take care.